Welcome to this special edition of the Yahowah vlog. I'm your host, Craig Wynn. We're going to begin a new series today, and we'll continue it this evening and for the next few weeks. It is called Luminaries. It is from the fourth volume, yet unpublished, of the Coming Home series. It will be entitled Maor, which means luminary. And it is our custom to do things in parallel as opposed to sequentially, which means we are obviously going to continue our basic series. We have yet to complete everything that can be learned about the Shabuah harvest. We have a lot of material to cover pursuant to it. And we'll continue our series on coming home, Messiah, out in the Ocean Studio, and we will return sooner rather than later. We didn't go down to the Rainbow Studio to do an episode of Twistianity because it just didn't seem appropriate to do it while the Twistians were celebrating Easter, and we were, of course, observing Pesach Matsah. So we will continue our theme of doing many things at once. Because I think it makes for a more entertaining program. It keeps us more diversified. So that you are aware, since this is coming from the fourth volume of Coming Home, in all fairness, it's actually the fourth and fifth volumes of Coming Home. I started Coming Home, volume 4, in the standard manner that I had each of the three before, which was just to proceed numerically through the Mizmor. And therefore, I translated, I think it's the 30th through the 33rd, may have gone a little further than that. Found them to be enormously interesting, and from there took off and followed an interesting thread for about 600 and some odd pages. And then we began again, and the beginning this time was to follow up based upon everything we had learned, based upon that just amazing revelation in the last word picture, the 31st Mashal. And it was so transformational in our understanding of where we are in all of this, and what our role is, what our timing is, and who is doing what for whom and why. And how Yahweh's entire story is playing out, that I began rewriting what was the fourth volume as a whole new volume, and got up to, around 600 to 700 pages. And I realized, that isn't the right place to start it. And it isn't the right name that I had for it, which was Bashar Herald. And so, I started all over again. And so I'm writing Coming Home volumes 4 and 5. Hope to have both of them published maybe in the next 60 days if all goes well. Hopefully even sooner than that. We're going to do everything we can to get this done prior to the celebration of Shabuah this year. And in the rewrite of the rewrite of the rewrite and expansion of what we're doing. And I have no issue with admitting all of this, because at this point, I'm translating and writing for two reasons, well, maybe three. My personal growth. I am never going to stop learning. The moment I stop learning, I stop growing. And I want to be like our God. I never want to stop learning. I never want to stop growing and translating and making the connections between things, particularly now that we have such an enormous basis, a foundation of knowledge and understanding, that each time we turn over a new word and a new statement, it speaks volumes to us. So this is just the best time of all to be learning. The second reason I'm doing this is because I thought it would be more interesting to keep the vlog that we're doing, the Yahowah vlog, current, exciting, so that it's at the cutting edge of what we're discovering and learning, because I think that would make it much more interesting than me just simply reviewing what we have learned thus far in our books from the past. Most of the devoted listeners to this program have already read all of the books, so why not grow the entire covenant family through the latest and the most extraordinary things that we're discovering? And the third reason that we are doing this is that we have turned a corner. We have reached a point where time simply does not allow new members of the covenant family. There will be time for that. It's just that we're up against a deadline. Whether it's going to be this Shabuah or next Shabuah for the harvest of the covenant family, the fact is that a year's time or 2 months' time is not enough time for somebody who is hearing these programs for the first time to read what they would need to read, study it, think about it, learn from it, act upon it, incorporate it into their lives, respond to it, and then make a contribution to the covenant family, stumbling occasionally, making mistakes, and learning from them, so that they not only know what God is offering and wants in return, but are contributing at the level that God says, this is a person that I can trust to elevate from 3 dimensions to 7 dimensions. This is somebody that I feel comfortable empowering, enriching, and enabling, making immortal to that extent that I know that through it all, they'll listen, they'll respond appropriately, they'll be thoughtful and observant, and they will be reliable, all of which God needs before elevating someone to covenant status. So, therefore, we've begun the process of preparing the library for the long-term growth of the remnant of Yisrael and the Goyim that will be gathered in service to this community that begins 7 years from now. So there's plenty of material in these programs to get the world through the next 7 years. And then we start the beginning of tomorrow. We will begin this glorious 1,000-year celebration of Sukkah, where the mortal remnant of Israel, as mere babes, will be given the opportunity to do all the things that God wants, to show that they are observant, that they're good listeners, that they're willing to be thoughtful about what they're hearing, they're willing to respond appropriately, and that no matter what comes their way, what obstacles are thrown in their path, what mistakes they may make, they'll quickly respond to learn from them, grow as a result of them, and demonstrate their reliability so that sometime during that 1,000-year period, they can be elevated into covenant status. So this is Yahowah's library for that purpose, and that's what we're building. So those are the 3 reasons we're doing it this way, and I hope you're enjoying the process. So with no further ado, let's begin the new series called Luminaries. It is from Mow'ed, and this will eventually become the 4th volume by that name of the Coming Home series under the Yada Yahowah brand. It is offered to reinforce 2 essential truths. And when I say essential, I think what I'm going to share with you now represents the 2 pillars outside of the temple. These are the most important, the most often deployed, the most beloved, the most reliable, the most enduring and capable servants of Yah. And of course, that list begins with Dowd, who the world unfortunately knows by the corrupted name David. But his name is Dowd, means beloved. He is absolutely and unequivocally Yahweh's firstborn son. That is a title that he shares with none other. He earned that title because he was Adam, the very person that Yahweh breathed a conscience and consciousness into, having made Dowd himself for himself, making Dowd Yahweh's firstborn son. He is our Messiah. He is the former and returning King. And he is our Savior because he fulfilled Pesach Matsah and Bikuwrym in year 4000 Yah. The second individual is Yada, one who knows. And he is currently acting in the role of Yahweh's Nakri, observant foreigner. He is equipped with Yahweh's 7 spirits as the Towrah stem, representing the tree of knowledge. And he serves as Dowd's Bashar herald, and much more than that, all to facilitate the restoration and return of Dowd in year 6000 Yah, 2033, on Kippurim. Dowd's purpose is to lead us, to inspire us, to shepherd us, and to save us. My job is to say, that's Dowd. That's our King. He's our Savior. He is the Son of God. Pay attention. Do not steal anything that's attributed to him to create a religious myth like Jesus. Don't negate anything that applies to him, like rabbinical Jews do, as they search for a nameless Messiah, as they're bereft of a Savior, as they deny the Son of God. My job is to call your attention to Dowd. His job is to be everything that the firstborn Son of God represents. For we have learned that Dowd is Elyon. Ultimately, that is how he's returning, which is the very influence of Almighty God in our presence. These are the main characters of God's story. And he presents them and what he has asked them to do, why he has chosen them, how he will deploy them, and when, where, often. These are not men with one life. They're men with 6, 7, and 8 lives apiece. From God's perspective, these men are not only essential, they are inseparable. Their stories are not only complete when the life of one is reflected by the other. We find that Dowd and Yada, introduced in the opening chapter of the Towrah, are together again when the story concludes. They are essentially the son of the moon, which is the theme that we will adhere to in the first, well, will be about 200 pages when I'm done, maybe 250 pages of Coming Home, Volume 4. Lots of programs that will be devoted to the interplay between the sun and the moon, between the greater and the lesser luminaries. And so it was on the fourth day of creation that Yahweh revealed how the lesser luminary, which is from Katan, it actually means the younger of the two, would come to reflect the greater luminary's brilliance as they would work together to fulfill the Mow'edym, the restoring witnesses to the eternal testimony. I'm laughing because for those who have listened to me and know me for a long time, every time that I have a private conversation with God, he always refers to me as young man, and he's done it from the beginning. And I've always thought it was clever, and that I'm anything but young from a normal human perspective. But Katan does mean young man, younger of the two. But it's also interesting, and while it is true that I'm 600 years younger than is Dowd, which is, quite a period of time, and the sixth generation after Dowd, with 6 being the number of man, and it repeated twice in that scenario, and with Dowd having spent 6 years in Eden prior to being exposed, and Dowd spending 600 years on his own outside of the garden before we would spend half that amount of time together as inseparable friends. But the most interesting part of being the lesser luminary and the younger of the two is that there are times when I act as Dowd's father, and there are times when I actually am Dowd's father. And so that part of it is interesting, which is why Yahweh has to say, okay. They're both older, and they're both, he thinks, great. And so it is true that there is this complexity and interesting plot twist to the story. But that's the way the story reads, and that's the way that Yahweh laid it out. And let's be clear, there is an amazing distinction between these two individuals. Well, they have many attributes in common, and they have worked with and for Yahweh and for one another for a very long time. Dowd is the firstborn, and he is our Savior, and he is the King. And in all of the things that I've done in my many lives with Yahweh, they all revolve around a singular mission. Support Dowd. Acknowledge Dowd. Reinforce what Dowd has achieved. Reacquaint the world with this very special man. In other words, I am the man who has been hired by Yahweh to support his son and to be there for him, essentially every step of the way. And there have been many ways that we have striven together over the long march of time. If all of this is new to you, if this is hard for you to process, then I'm simply going to tell you what God has to say. And I have chosen to go where the words lead. You can choose to follow me there and be part of this story or not, your choice. But that's clearly God's intent. So I want to begin with the first prophecy, the opening prophetic statement in the Torah. After presenting the first 3 days of creation, of Yahweh introducing himself and saying that he is our creator, the creator of the universe, and explaining how he is essentially the equal of light. That is, light is the most prevalent thing in our universe that can be equated to his nature, and how we have to use relativity to understand the creative process, and that it is an expansive process, and that he created the universe with a big bang, and that he would do so over 6 24-hour days from his perspective at creation, which based upon the background radiation from the Big Bang, using his term, was exactly 6 24 hours from his perspective, which is, the math works out to 6 24-hour days from his perspective, and 14 billion years from ours on Earth time. But it's stories told from his perspective, which is why it's 6 24-hour days. And he speaks of the birth of stars and the beginning of time, and that second day, and the significance of water being the nursery of stars, which is something we have subsequently learned. And again, over and over again, reemphasizing the concepts of relativity. And then in the third day, animal life from the sea is conceived. And it's a progressive, creative process, all in the order that things actually transpired. And then God doesn't speak about creating anything on the fourth day. There's no mention of anything being created on the fourth day. The fourth day is purely prophetic. So God interrupted the creation account to say that in the middle of it, right there, smack in the middle of it, kind of like you would have the center candle and that menorah that is spinning with 3 days on either side and one in the middle. God preempted his story of creation to tell us a prophetic story. It reads, God said, with the narrative playing out over time, there will be, Haya. There has been decided upon, or it has been decided upon, that there will exist throughout time and by choice. This was called imperfect jussive, third person masculine singular. It's an interesting way of stating this, because the call would mean, what I'm telling you now, it's going to sound really symbolic, but I don't want you to interpret symbolically. I'm telling you this as an actual and genuine fact. The call stem. The imperfect means this is going to play out over the long march of time. There is no end to what I'm talking about here. In the jussive, it is to say that this was an expression of free will. And it is free will expressed in the third person, which means that the Maor are the ones who made this choice. All right, so that be known, there will be, it has been decided upon that there will exist as a function of free will throughout time and by choice, Maoreth, luminaries, to ponder the implications of light and enlightenment. Maoreth, brilliant and shining providers of illumination, of enlightenment. It's a compound of Ma, to contemplate the implications of, or light. In the expanse of Rakya, within the spreading out of matter and space, to firmly extend the very presence, to expand the heavens, Hashamayim, the spiritual realm of God and the universe, to understand the separation between badal, bein, to distinguish and discern what it is to be set apart, to ascertain the means for inclusion, membership, if you will, as well as the cause of expulsion on the other side, between the time of light, Hayom, as it is distinct from, differentiated from, the darkness of the night. Before I go on, let's ponder just a few of the implications that we have so far. This is, as I said, it's the most It's the foremost prophecy in the Torah. It is juxtaposed in the midst, right in the heart of the creation account, where nothing is created but something profound is declared. And I don't think that prior to us discussing it on this program, me writing about it, me drawing your attention to it, that anyone perceived this as a prophecy, that what existed instead was that it was the wedge that atheists would wield at Christians when they claimed that they wanted the creation account taught in schools and that the universe was 6 days old, when they made every manner of mistakes because, well, they're not well informed and their perspective is upside down and backwards. And so the atheist would say, according to your creation account, the plants were created on the third day and the sun and the moon weren't created until the fourth day. And that's not possible because the plants would need sunlight. And what they didn't realize is that this says nothing about the moon or the sun being created. It doesn't even mention by name sun or moon. It uses metaphors and symbols for them so that you might think beyond the physical nature of the sun and the moon into what God is trying to convey by them, what they represent from in this narrative. And so plant life existed. Plant life would be developed and it would consume much of the carbon dioxide that was in our atmosphere, particularly from all the volcanic eruptions that would preclude being able to actually see anything beyond the carbons in the sky. And so it was that plant life in the oceans that consumed the carbon dioxide and created a oxygen and nitrogen atmosphere. And the atmosphere became translucent. And indeed, at this time, the symbols that God is conveying here became visible. So that is part of what is being conveyed, but the fact is that there's so much more to this story. So it begins, God said, with the narrative playing out over time. Amar, he announced the message that would have ongoing implications. Again, take this literally, imperfect. There's no end to what I'm telling you here. This is something that plays out through the full fabric of time. There will be, Hayat, the basis of Yahweh's name, which I think is important at this juncture. And it was written in, as I've shared previously, the call stem, imperfect conjugation, and jussive mood, which means a decision was made. And since it's an expression of third person volition, it means that, and it's masculine, that it applies to the Maoreth. It was their decision, their will, their choice. And their choices would have lasting influence over the full fabric of time. And that what I'm telling you here will be using symbolic language, but I want you to perceive this as being literal, genuine, and real in the call stem. There will be Maoreth. Shemek is the term for son. That Yahweh has a word for sun, but Maoreth and Yara for moon, and yet he didn't use them here. He used Maoreth, which means to ponder the implications of light. Ma'or, and in the plural, Maoreth, as luminaries, to ponder this brilliance that's going to be provided, the illumination that they're going to provide in the expanse of, while spreading out and extending the very presence of the heavens. Now, the fact is that the sun and the moon, they do not expand the universe, do they? Not at all. However, if you're looking at the implications of the Maoreth, as God is using them, they absolutely and unequivocally expand the spiritual realm of the heavens. It is because of them that the heavens have any human souls in them at all. So they are the two individuals, by fulfilling the Mow'edym, by conveying God's message, that expand the spiritual realm. And they do so to understand, and they exist to understand, the separation between badal, bien. Bien is probably my favorite Hebrew word. It means to make connections so that you understand, so that you can discern what is correct by making the proper associations. It is how you go from knowing to understanding. So that with badal, it means to ascertain the means for inclusion or the cause for expulsion. Because there is a time of light, and it is distinct from the darkness of the night. The relationship between Yahweh and humankind has had periods of light and darkness. It has been in the darkness for most of the past 2,500 years. And in the time of the darkness, it is for the lesser luminary to reflect the sun's light. But the sun, his light is going to shine most brightly when he returns in his very position of honor. Is going to be as brilliant as the sun in Yahweh's presence. So they will exist, Haya. They will be as wonderful symbols, brilliant examples, and obvious signs to serve as illustrious exemplars of consent, offering miraculous proof. La oath. Well, you could just say they will be signs. But you'd miss so much of the etymology of oath, all of which is appropriate here. Wonderful symbols, brilliant examples, obvious signs, illustrious examples of consent, offering miraculous proof as a means to convey information on a banner to guarantee the dependability of the assertion. Announcements and illustrations to be remembered, and as evidence which makes the message more clearly known, especially when evaluating the account of recompense versus reward. And by offering their consent, it is from Uth, to be in agreement, showing a willingness to engage and do what needs to be accomplished based upon an established set of conditions. They're a lot more than signs, aren't they? In addition, for the Mow'edym, for the appointed meeting times, for the restoring witnesses to the eternal testimony. Waha Mow'edym. Very few words in Hebrew as powerful as Mow'ed and Mow'edym. It too is a compound word, speaking of the designated periods which have been determined for a specific purpose, authorized by the authority pertaining to restoration during the feast. It is from Mo. This pertains to Ed, the restoring witnesses to the everlasting testimony and the enduring evidence, as well as Ya'ad, to meet on an appointed schedule, as well as for days, the reckoning of time when there is light, and for years, Shana, the complete cycle of seasons, a solar year, which is a measure of age and renewal of life. Barashith in the beginning, Genesis 1:14. That's the introduction of it. Powerful, particularly when you use amplification to zoom in on and more closely examine, as if under a microscope, the concepts behind each of these marvelous words. So this is the opening line of the fourth day of Yahweh's creation account. And it reveals that nothing was actually conceived at this time. The story was set up to play out, is what God achieved on this day. These oath, illustrious examples, would become visible for the purpose of directing our attention to the Mow'edym, the appointed meeting times for the restoring witness to the eternal testimony. It is interesting that oath is written with an LF. And that is because if you look at the design of the LF, it designates the representation of these two men. Yahweh has designated Dowd as his ram, and an aleph is a ram's head. He has designated Yada as a bull, and the shape of that head and the yoke that goes across the head, even the shape of the horns, are drawn such that the letter also represents a bull, particularly a bull that is yoked to bear a burden. You see, you would never yoke a ram, but you do a bull. And so that Aleph designates both men in oath. So these illustrious examples would become visible for the purpose of directing our attention to the Mow'edym. And it's a shame that so few people have an appreciation for the multiple and fantastic terms that Yahweh uses to describe his 7 annual meetings with us. Mow'edym is my favorite of them because it speaks of the appointed meeting times for the restoring witnesses to the eternal testimony. What a lovely way of describing it. Yahweh also uses mikra and mikre in the plural, which is an invitation to be called out and meet, from kara, the verb. He calls them chog, feasts and festivals. He refers to them as being essential. This is something of extraordinary importance to our God. There are 7 of them, and as it would transpire, the men being depicted as the greater and lesser luminaries would fulfill all 7 of them. They are Pesach, Matsah, and Bikuwrym in the spring. We just completed last evening our celebration of this 7-day Chog festival to be with our God. Pesach, Matsah, and Bikuwrym. Dowd fulfilled all 3 in year 4000 Yah, which coincidentally happened to be the 4th day in year 4000 Yah, 33 CE. And Then you have Shabuah and Towrah, which are Yada's responsibility to fulfill. They are both harvests, with Towrah also showcasing the sacrifice of the man from Edom, who is the Adamah Parah, to purge the returning remnant of Yisrael of their guilt, so that they're in position to observe and witness and celebrate Dowd's return with Yahweh on the Mow'ed, the Mikra of Yom Kippurim, the day of reconciliations, so that that mortal remnant can enjoy the next 1,000 years in the garden as the earth is restored to those conditions on Towrah in advance of Kippurim, the homecoming, the family reunion, and the wedding that will take place on that date, and that we will sukkah, camp out with our covenant family and our God and his son for 1,000 years here on earth. Those are the Mow'edym. They are the only path to God. They're the only means to enable the benefits of the covenant. There is no other approach to God. You either capitalize upon them and celebrate them, or you will be estranged from God. And for them to be viable, someone had to fulfill them. And that, my friends, is why God interrupted his creation account to tell this story. Doing so on the fourth day, because that's when the first three, the most important three, would be fulfilled. Pesach, Matsah and Bikuwrym by Dowd. So all this is to suggest that the souls of these Maor, these luminaries, in the plural Maoreth, were conceived by Yahweh. And doing so very early in the creative process. They represent individuals. They have souls. It says that he would deploy them such that they would become the most enlightening characters and illustrious examples in his evolving relationship with humankind. And so it has been and continues to be. So it began. God announced a narrative that would play out over time. It has been decided, they have agreed, that there will be Maoreth, luminaries, to ponder the implications of light and enlightenment. Maor and Maoreth in the plural. Spoken using the imperfect conjugation, Yahweh's pronouncement was open-ended and not constrained to this moment or any period of time. It is for all time. It defines time. As time would unfold and humans would evolve and then devolve, God's message would continue to echo throughout the epochs of time. The verb haya, which also serves as the basis of Yahweh's name and means to exist, was conveyed using the jussive mood in addition to the call stem and the imperfect conjugation, as I have mentioned. The jussive conveys free will in third person, indicating that Yahweh, either he is speaking in third person or that Yahweh offered them the opportunity, speaking of them in third person, to allow these men to make this choice. So that you can read it as Yahweh made the decision, that it was his will to deploy these sources of Maor illumination, or that Yahweh recognized that they would volunteer and that they would make them third person, and it was their choice. I don't think it matters, because clearly these men both agreed, and this is what Yahweh wanted. So his choice in this regard is to be understood literally and to be appreciated for the ongoing effect of what these two souls would achieve. It's true that I was the first to discover and share the realization that there are a host of Hebrew terms that are compound words prefixed by interrogatories, such as ma and my, as is the case with Maor. In this way, Yahweh is encouraging us to contemplate the implications of or, light, illumination, and enlightenment. And indeed, light is the defining characteristic of God, of our very existence. Matter is organized light, a diminished form of light. And light defines the universe. It is essential to life. It is the way we measure space. It is the way we also measure time. We talk about light years, not as time, but as a measure of distance. We use the speed of light and how far it can travel in a year as a reference also to time. We know, for example, that until light energy coalesced into matter, which is a diminished form of light energy, time didn't even flow. That time is literally determined by light becoming matter, such that when matter is upgraded to light again, time simply exists and no longer flows. Light actually helps us have a better understanding of Hebrew terms. When I said that something was written in the imperfect, which means it's true over the course of time, well, light simply exists. A Hebrew verb written in the imperfect is akin to light. It was true, is true, will always be true, never ceasing to be true. It is true for all time. It is like light, always existing. It is light that allows us to be observant. It is the source of enlightenment that enables knowledge and understanding. Light is quite literally the means to God. And it is what we experience when we find God. It is to light that we must aspire, because our physical bodies must be replaced by it for us to leave this planet, to explore the universe. For us to enter the seventh dimension of heaven, we must be transformed from matter into light, at least the conveyance of our soul. Our soul is beyond the three dimensions that we understand. It may already be a seven-dimensional construct for all we know. And the Maor exists to show the way. It is why they are associated with the Mow'edym, which provide the way. The purpose of enlightenment is to help us badal bein, to discern the difference between, day and night, light and darkness, God and man, heaven and hell. It is by making comparisons that we venture from knowing to understanding. So God said, they will exist for a time as wonderful symbols and brilliant examples, as obvious signs and illustrious exemplars, proving their consent to convey miraculous evidence. La'oth. Now, this serves as one of the many reasons that I favor amplification in the translation process, the first person to ever do it. There is so much more to oath than sign. That by just rendering it signed, it misses the point. Recognizing that verbs define nouns and that uth is written identically to oath in the Hebrew text, an accurate definition must incorporate the intent of the verb, which is to agree, to provide consent, showing a willingness to engage and to do what has been requested. And that is the essence of the oath. The Maor become illustrious luminaries for this very reason. They were responsive. Yahweh asked and they complied, doing so willingly. There were things God wanted accomplished, so he conveyed the request. They agreed, and they did what he wanted done. Sounds simple, doesn't it? And yet, it is extraordinarily rare. This is not to say that there weren't other aspects of their personality that Yahweh found appealing, even serviceable, but that his reason for deploying them began fundamentally with their willingness to listen, to respond, and to prove reliable. When deployed, they would do each time what they were asked to accomplish. It might be a rough road. They might trip and fall. They may make a number of mistakes. In fact, they would do all of those things. Each time they would trip and fall. Each time they would make mistakes. Each time there would be reluctance here and there. But they'd get back up. They'd learn from their errors. And they'd keep on going. And they were responsive. When God called, they listened. When he asked, they did. They proved reliable, responsive and reliable. Those are the two things that God wants. Doesn't seem like a lot, but, well, these fellows were so unique in that they came to define God's plan. We came to trust God, and he came to rely on us in return. You could say it. We came to rely on God, and he came to trust us as a result. Mutuality. And if you think that sounds arrogant to say that God came to rely upon two men, or that he trusted them, that's the only way to interpret the story. The story doesn't pan out any other way. Doesn't say these men were perfect. They're not. In fact, God would hate it if they were perfect because he couldn't use them as exemplars if they were, and he would be bored stiff with them if they were. It just says that they were responsive and reliable. They were decent listeners and were willing to act accordingly. They were thoughtful. They had the attitude that he wanted to use. I'm sure they, as I said, they had other attributes, both of them, that God found useful, maybe even entertaining. God has a type. They were his type. They are his type. And that's even worth considering too. I get a lot of flack by people saying that I'm too aggressive and I don't suffer fools kindly, and that would be a lot more people to be part of the covenant family if I were more accommodating, meek, mild-mannered, and inclusive. God chose a bullish personality. He didn't want any of that. In fact, he's trying to preclude that, which is why he chose this personality. It reflects what he wants done. If you don't like it, take it up with him, and you can challenge him as to why he doesn't want more people in the covenant, why he wants it to be restrictive, why he wants those who represent him to be uncompromising, intolerant, aggressive, even to the point of being agitated. Moving on. We can rationally and confidently depend upon the announced assertion that Yahweh's illustrious ones and his illustrations should be considered and remembered because they serve as evidence which makes his overall narrative, story, and message more clearly known and more easily understood. It really isn't all that complicated, even if it is multi-layered and is far deeper and richer in its content than what anyone has previously perceived. But the deeper and richer it becomes, the more reassuring it is. With each new discovery, it just becomes more Yah, conveying who he is, what he likes, what he's trying to achieve, and with whom. In particular, these two Maoreth help the enlightened evaluate what leads to a reward and to recompense based upon the choices each individual makes regarding them. Therefore, just as Uth speaks of being in agreement and offering one's consent by showing a willingness to engage, it is a quid pro quo in the sense that it applies to the exemplars and to those learning from them. God has established conditions that must be known and accepted, and then acted upon by those choosing to live with him. These fellows shine a brilliant light on them. They embody them. They enable them. So the Maoreth is very similar, of course, to the menorah. Very, very little difference other than the th versus the ending, and the nun being placed in the middle of it because the nun represents sons and the growth of those sons and the development of life. Menorah and Maoreth are very similar words, are they not? When Yahweh, a year and a half ago, came to me and said, we're going to make some changes in our approach. I want you to replace the lion that had been the lion's head that had been our branding logo on the cover and on the spine and of every book that we had done, and in all of our outreach. It was always a gold lion, representing the Lion of Judah, of course, but always. God says, no, we're not going to use that anymore. We're going to switch to the menorah. Menorah is my lamp. It's your lamp. And I don't want the menorah done as a traditional look. We're appealing to people today. I want a modern interpretation of my 7-stem luminary, my menorah. That's going to be our branding. Yes, sir. My job is pretty simple. Listen and respond appropriately. That's what he asked for. That's what he has. That's what we have done. Here you go. Right there. Doesn't sound like it was a big change, but we ended up redoing all of the books for publication and on for the website. We did the whole look of the website. It all revolves around that menorah, because what God wanted to talk about is the story of his Maoreth, luminaries. They have been provided to enlighten and to ponder the implications of light. And they represent two men who have and will fulfill Yahweh's Mow'edym, his appointed meeting times, for the restoring witness to the eternal testimony. And these, as I have shared, include Pesach Matsah and Bikuwrym, which Dowd, as the Gadol Maor, fulfilled in 33 CE, year 4000 Yah. And the Shabuah harvest cultivated by Yada and the fall Mow'edym fulfilled by both men in 2033, year 6000 Yah. On the first day of creation, 14 billion years ago, out of the darkness and to end the chaos and confusion, God created Or, light. It would lead to Bien, understanding, and badal, separation. And on the second day, there was Rakya, an expansion of matter and space, in addition to Mayim, water, the agent of life and of birth. And again, for there to be Bien, discernment, and badal, those who were set apart. On the third creative epoch, we would witness the material world take shape, and Eretz, land emerge, and such that Zerah, seeds of life, could be sown. Dasha, vegetation, would grow, ultimately providing a variety of men, of plant life, including Etz, trees. And all of that was Tov, good, beautiful, productive, and beneficial according to our God. This assessment of the fourth day is what followed. And with nothing created, the reason for the inclusion of the luminaries at this time is because they become essential to our understanding of the role they play in God's plan, as well as humanity's access to it. The spring Mow'edym of Pesach, Matsah, and Bikuwrym, fulfilled as they were by Dowd. And if you now know that, you know it because it was revealed to me. And then I was able to prove it, understand it, and share it with you. And not only were the spring Mow'edym fulfilled by Dowd, Yada, by another name, Boaz, was at his side. And this occurred in 33 CE, which was year 4000 Yah. It was likely Dowd's fourth of 6 lives. And so while King Dowd is the Gadol Mayor, the greater and older luminary, and the following assessment, without the Katan Mayor, the lesser and younger luminary, no one would have known. Not a soul, not now, not ever, because we're running out of time and we're about to come to a time when it's going to get really dark. And without this awareness, nothing would have been achieved by the fulfillment of the spring Mow'edym, thereby precluding access to the covenant and to God. Even more, without Yada, no one would have restored Dowd's reputation as the chosen one, as the Son of God, and the Messiah who became our Savior by enabling the benefits of the Bereth covenant through the Mow'edym appointments established by the restoring witnesses. It would be the lesser luminary, the younger of the two, who would restore Dowd's dignity, doing so in Yada Yahowah, thereby opening a window through which we might know and approach Yahweh. Without the both of them working together, there is no covenant. There is no extension on life. There is no way to know or to approach Yahweh. These enlightening individuals help us contemplate the implications of being separated unto God, or the alternative, from Him. The first of the two would shine for all to see as the Son of God, the firstborn of God. the anointed Messiah, and the chosen king, whose life began in the beginning, in the garden. He was also aboard the ark as the name, Shem. And on the third day, in the heart of Yahweh's timeline, he was found shepherding sheep in Bethlehem. Then he would reappear near the commencement of the fourth day when fulfilling the spring Mow'edym, born to Ruth and Boaz, delivering the kinsman redeemer. Knowing that darkness would ensue, he fulfilled his promise nevertheless. His brilliance would not be reflected until on the cusp of his return on the sixth day. The lesser luminary would emerge out of the darkness to shine a light on all he had and will achieve. Independently and collectively, they would write and they would say more about Yahweh than any others, with Dowd writing most of the Mizmor, and Yada in Yada Yahowah writing 15 times more than all of the prophets combined. We've also discovered that as Ethan Ha is Rocky, he would also compose the mashal, the word pictures. But that's getting way ahead of our story. As it would transpire when designated as the Choder, God equates Yada with the Etz Dath, the tree of knowledge, in collaboration with Yahweh. And acting as the Nakri, the observant foreigner, he would compose the Nesh sign Yahweh will be raising to call his people home, literally fulfilling this prophecy. Central to appreciating God's illustration is the realization that the Gadol and Katan Meoreth, as men, are the two individuals who have and will fulfill the Mow'edym. Not only was Yada the first to recognize Dowd's contribution to Pesach Matsah and Bikuwrym, he has been assigned the responsibility for the Shabua and Towrah in gatherings. And as the man from Edom and the Adamah Parah, Yada will purge the remnant of Yisrael of guilt, preparing them for Dowd's Bikuwrym homecoming. And then during Sukkah, Dowd and Yahweh will stand side by side as trees of lives and knowledge. So just as the prophecy portends, these two men serve as illustrious examples of restoring witnesses to Yahweh's eternal testimony while working collaboratively with our Father. Now, even as we contemplate the days and years, they shine a brilliant light on how God's plan plays out during our long journey out of and back to the garden. Dowd as Adam in the beginning, as the lone man in the garden, returns to be king of the garden on Sukkah. And as Gabriel in 555 BCE alongside Michael, the same two men, Dowd and Yada, he revealed the exact day that he would fulfill Chag Matzah in 33 CE, unambiguously revealing this essential date on God's calendar. 2 millennia later, Yada became the first to explain Dowd's prophecy, and then to use the result to establish the rest of the timeline, even explaining when Shabua, Towrah, Bikuwrym, and Sukkah as Mow'edym would transpire. The two Me'oreth, sources of illumination and enlightenment, are presented using one of the rare occasions in which a masculine noun, maor, becomes plural using the feminine suffix. Now, this may indicate that these two men are able to navigate through time because Yahweh envelops their nephesh souls, feminine, in his ruach, spirit, feminine, as they move through the millennia. Now, I want to be careful on this idea, navigate through time. We're not actually navigating through time. No time travel here. We absolutely do not go back in time, and we don't even move forward in time. We are inserted as time envelops on its normal pace and path. At a time certain, Yahweh created Dowd's nephesh soul. 600 years thereafter, he conceived mine. We were placed in God's story at the time and place of his choosing to accomplish what he wanted done, removed and re-exerted thereafter. We're not traveling in time. We're deployed through the ordinary flow of time. That is up to the point where time simply exists. Yahweh's lamp, as I have shared, is a menorah, which is also feminine in Hebrew. So there are three feminine associations here, which would justify taking the souls of two guys and making the collection of the two be presented as with the feminine plural. So the feminine plural on a masculine noun. It's uncommon in Hebrew. When it happens, we ought to pay attention. And it happened here. By scribing or in the infinitive, it serves as an actionable title for the maor. They are or. They're sources of illumination and enlightenment, thereby expanding the light of heaven to the earth. Both maoreth, sources of enlightenment, are called gadol, which is to say they're both important to God and to man as influential conveyances of Yahweh's message, and they're both, well, really old by human standards anyway, not by God's, but certainly by ours. Dowd is 6,000 years old. I'm 5,400. I don't think I look too bad for 5,400, but, then again, my wife tells me I'm handsome, so I must be. It only matters to me because that's what she thinks, and she thinks that it works for me. We've been together now for 5,400 years. So that's a very sound marriage, I would have to say. And as she struggles with the fact that she's become a known player in the story, I constantly remind her it's because I chose her. And Yahweh loves her, no question about her. And Yahweh trusts her. And Yahweh enjoys deploying her. But we had the argument of who is a gift to whom. I finally prevailed in that she is a gift to me because I've chosen to engage every time I'm deployed. It's with the same woman, Leah. Yeah, we've had quite a relationship. And every engagement of Dowd and myself as these maoreth, well, they're always intense. We're sometimes loud. We're a bit distinguished at least from others. Our mission is to promote growth by magnifying and amplifying the means to be enriched and to be empowered by the covenant and by Yahweh. We serve Yahweh. We are Ebed. We're co-workers, one another and of him. We exist and we are deployed at his pleasure. Also, while both men are important, keep in mind, one is much more important than the other. He's sovereign of the day, addressing the time when the nation of Israel will be born under his leadership and when it will be restored upon his return as king. Also, as I will demonstrate by following Yahweh's words to their natural conclusion, it isn't a slight on the Katan to infer that he isn't sovereign of the day. This is not only because he relishes the responsibility of being the one who removes the darkness. That's a pretty good use of lives, even if it takes 7 or 8 of them to get this accomplished. But nonetheless, it is a really productive use of life to provide light when it's needed most in the darkness. But also because, well, as you will learn, well, Dowd is the firstborn of Yahweh. And while he had a really, really crappy dad in his third life, in his second life, I was his father. And when he came to fulfill the spring Mow'edym, Pesach Matsah and Bikuwrym, I was his father again. My wife, Leah, named Ruth then, was his mother. We were there for our son every step of the way. He serves. I served. It's hard to write about yourself in first person in these cases, so I like the idea of Yada serves, the Katan serves, as Dowd's surrogate father 3 times, and as his actual father twice along the way. Fathers, of course, revel in their sons' success. A loving father will give it all for his son, holding nothing back. And I can tell you that has been our relationship. I exist for him. He exists for you. Therefore, they will exist. They will be for enlightenment as luminaries, Mayoreth, to support the expansion of the spiritual realm. Without our contribution, the spiritual realm would not have no humans in it. So indeed, the expansion of the spiritual realm, to be an or light, and to provide illumination and enlightenment upon the earth and the land, and therefore it will continue to exist like this thereafter, based upon what preceded it. Bereshith, Genesis 1:15. And God acted and engaged to appoint for this particular task what pertains to these 2 ha-meoreth, sources of illumination and enlightenment, who are gadolim, who are both substantial and empowering, important and influential. With the ha-gadol, the greater, more distinguished and older, of the mayor, the luminary, mimshalah, prominent and powerful, having dominion and authority, the one governing as sovereign of the illuminated time. And with ha-katan, the lesser, the younger and more recent ha-mayor, luminary, mimshalah, prominent and powerful, having dominion and authority, the one authorized to lead through illustrious insights for the time of darkness, when the light is not as well known, along with the heavenly powers. Bereshith, Genesis 1:16. So this is now the second of 4 times that Yahweh will address the Maor in the opening chapter of the Torah, which is remarkable in and of itself. The first time it was to say that they would serve as oath, Mow'ed, as willing signs and symbols, and as restoring witnesses to the eternal testimony. This affirmed that they would write about and then fulfill the 7 annual invitations to be called out and meet with God, enabling what Yahweh intended. And now in the second iteration of the Maor, sources of enlightenment, they are Mimshala, prominent leaders who are authorized by God to govern. And they will do so in the manner Yahweh favors, in Mashal, which is to effectively communicate by drawing word pictures. And as we will learn when contemplating the identity of Ethan Ha-Ezraki and the 89th Mizmor, this ode to Dowd's recovery and his relationship with Yahweh, Yada would write them on Dowd's behalf and then explain them thereafter to the covenant family. I find it particularly telling that King Dowd, as the Gadol, the greater and older of the Maor luminaries, is heralded as the sovereign of the day, which means that the Katan, lesser Maor, will serve most prominently during Dowd's darkest hours, which he did. And again, during the dark times which precede his return, which he is. It may even suggest that during the millennial Shabbat, he will serve Dowd behind the scenes as a father figure. Dowd in the limelight. Yada behind him in the shadow. I hope that's true. Further, when the king arrives, his seat of honor will shine as brilliantly as the sun. Recognizing this and following through with the metaphor of the sun and the moon, the leadership and advice of the lesser luminary will eventually focus on the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant and what Dowd will do with it on Yom Kippurim in 2033. Clarifying some of the words Yahweh selected, the menorah will serve to Raka, firmly extend and expand the expanse of the spiritual realm, such that they are responsible for properly preparing those afforded access while increasing the number, certainly the quality of souls allowed into heaven. Even then, their role will be to support God's family. We may even lead excursions across the vast expanse of the material universe at the appropriate time. And while it may not apply, it's too specific to toss aside. Raka also speaks of being stretched out and beaten, something both of these men endure. Dowd during Pesach, Yada during Towrah. Now, for those who may have been uncomfortable with the deduction that Maor was written to encourage us to consider the ways these luminaries expose the many facets of light, Yahweh removes any doubt with the inclusion of or, light, illumination, and enlightenment in his follow-up pronouncement. He wants our light to shine over the entire earth. And it is interesting to note that our enlightening reflections of God's light continue to exist throughout time, even as an extension of the past and what has occurred before. And in this case, the only things which had transpired previously were the initial 3 epochs of creation. Both Dowd and I would write extensively about this very thing. And should any have an issue with the deployment of either of the mayor, they will need to take up their argument with God. It was Yahweh who, Asha, has continually acted pursuant to the deployment of these mayoreth. And as I have mentioned, God considers them gadolim, intense and distinguished, empowering and important. You want to argue with him? Further, both were designated as Mishshalah by Yahweh, making them prominent and powerful. Their influence is on his dominion, and they have his authority. They will guide God's people by advancing understanding, drawing pictures with words. Words will be their medium. Also interesting, the Mayor were supported by Kokaba, heavenly powers, spiritual luminaries. The only difference between them would be when they would be most effective, in the light or in the darkness. But either way, their purpose is to enlighten. The Almighty, he offered them as a gift. He placed them in this position for this ongoing purpose. In the vast expanse, as extensive and as solid evidence of the spiritual realm, to expand the spiritual realm, and to provide light and enlightenment upon the land and on the earth. Bereshith, Genesis 1:17. Now, as previously mentioned, when we turn to the root of Rakya, we find that it suggests that these two men who are being dispatched will be trampled and beaten by others. This is what happened to Dowd when fulfilling Passover, and it will happen to Yada on Towrah, not to mention anyone who speaks in an authorized manner for God gets beaten up pretty regularly. And as a result of their sacrifices, Yahweh is providing solid evidence that Shamaim is expanding with the addition of many saved souls, or at least by a higher quality of soul. That's quite a gift. And it comes bearing additional enlightenment. It's Yahweh's intent for the greater and the lesser luminaries to become leaders of men, govern, showing leadership by offering proverbial, illustrative, and memorable pictures comprised of words. Be in charge, leading by quoting that which is intelligently communicated while making informative connections. During the light of the day and through the darkness of the night, providing a contrast to set apart as separate and distinct, and to expel and to exclude through understanding and discernment by making intelligent connections, leading to comprehending the light, in addition to wisely discerning insights during the obscuring darkness. God, he saw that indeed all of this was good. It was beneficial and productive. It was useful and agreeable to him, valuable and appropriate, pleasing and beneficial. Bereshith, in the beginning, Genesis 1:18. And so in his concluding narrative regarding these two mayor sources of illumination, God discloses the intent of Mishshalah by using its root, mashal, to govern by wielding words wisely. When it comes to leading his people, it will be through the testimony of these men. They will guide, as Yahweh has done, using illustrative depictions of what we need to know to get the most out of life. They will do as I have so many times asked: wield words wisely. The Almighty's Mayor will serve in good times and bad, in obscurity and in the light. And while this is as we should expect, badal, when fully being understood, is a double-edged sword. You see, and this is important. Their role, representing Yahweh, isn't just to provide the means for exclusion into the covenant family, or a method to be withdrawn during the harvest of Bikuwrym, Shabuah, and Towrah, but also to determine who is excluded. Badal addresses being severed from any association with God and being abandoned, even expelled. Therefore, one's perceptions of these men, Dowd and Yada, will affect the disposition of one's soul. This explains why the Mayor were featured so prominently in the opening chapter of the Towrah. I think this is a good place for us to conclude this introductory program. Tonight, as we move into Family Hour, our intent will be to hold a roundtable discussion on all that we have discussed. And this, the opening salvo, the first episode of Luminaries. And to hear what some of the most mature members and participants in the covenant think of this prophecy, the first in the Towrah, and the implications of it going forward throughout time. So I look forward to being with you when we resume. That will be 6 o'clock Atlantic time, which is Eastern Daylight Time, when we will commence with Family Hour and extend our discussion regarding Yahweh's luminaries. Look forward to seeing you then. Good day.
Hey there, thanks for tuning in. That was Fetch. Gotta run now. Catch y'all on our next podcast.